I love being at the top of Mount Everest. There's nothing like it. The energy up there, it's a magical, special place. There's only one summit of Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world. I love being up there. I would stay for longer if I could. I think close to 2 hours was the longest I ever hung out on top. It's just a happy place. And more than anything, I love feeling like I genuinely help and contribute to our clients having a successful experience and achieving their dreams, their goals, their bucket list. When I see them summit the mountain and the joy on their face, and I feel like I can participate in that a little bit, it makes me really happy.
Hello and welcome to the Duffel Shuffle. I'm Adrian Ballinger, and we're here to discuss the world of climbing and skiing in all its forms, through the eyes of mountain guides.
And I'm Sam Kiekefer. In each episode, we'll unpack exhilarating stories, share invaluable insights, and get up close and personal with some of the most experienced and passionate guides and athletes in the industry.
Whether you're a seasoned alpinist or a weekend warrior, the Duffel Shuffle is your ticket to the thrilling world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. Join us.
Welcome back. This is episode 26 of the Duffel Shuffle Podcast. Adrian, how are you?
I'm doing more or less good down here in Las Vegas for just a few more days. I'm finishing up my desert escape from winter and snow between what's been a great ski season and heading to Everest, of course. And it's been just a wild ride down here. I was just telling you before we hopped on, my motorcycle got stolen. That sucked. But then I had a fantastic experience with the Las Vegas Police Department, and actually the motorcycle was recovered today, damaged but recovered. So that's kind of fun. The tariff news, I know we're not going to dive into politics, which tariffs certainly fit into, but it is something I'm talking a lot about with people in the industry because there's just, I mean, the vast majority of things we climb on, clothe ourselves in, ski downhill on, are all made outside of the United States, the vast majority. And it's very hard for me to imagine how the sports we love don't become more expensive. So that's a little bit of a downer. But meanwhile, rock climbing is fantastic. I just had some of my very best friends in the world, Logan Talbot from Alpenglow and Topo and Kala from Ecuador, two of our best guides, all in the desert with me and Emily, rock climbing for a week and hang out with our kid playing in the desert and trying to make him not run into cactuses head first at full speed. So like life is so good in those ways. How about you?
Yeah, I guess my Vegas invitation got lost in the mail, but that's all right. I'll make it on the next trip.
Definitely next trip.
No, I'm good. I was in Canada with a bunch of friends on a personal trip. We flew into a hut and ski toured for a few days out of a hut, which was just awesome. And conditions were fine, but just being in the mountains with good friends and no cell service was a really nice refresh. So
amazing. Did you tour every day?
Toured every day. Yeah, I even had a rainy ski day at Revelstoke, which I basically never ski in the rain. But, when you're with your friends and you're in the mountains, it's hard to pass up a day of sliding on some sort of surface that was partially snow and partially other things. So
it must be a
it was a
Canada
great trip.
thing. The last time I skied rain was at Whistler, and it hammered rain.
I mean, I think it hammered rain here in Tahoe when I was gone. I think it's, we're not going to dive into it too much, but some of the news that we wanted to talk about was a tragic avalanche accident in Canada, just before I was there, and some very notable industry professionals lost their lives in that avalanche. But I think it's really a testament to the changing conditions, and that's a direct result of changing climate. And we don't have to dive into the political aspect of that, but certainly conditions are just changing, and the weather, the avalanche conditions seem to be, different than they have been historically. And we're, ready for more change in the future.
Yeah. And I guess could piggyback on that. Just these changing conditions are certainly something where it seems like we're losing some of the predictability that maybe we felt at times, or maybe we've comforted ourselves with at times. And yet at the same time as well, like the other thing the accident just reminded me is like how damn dangerous what we do playing in the mountains can be, has always been. I feel like we've been getting those reminders really too often recently. I can't say whether it's more or less from a decade ago or from a generation ago, but we've been losing a lot of really talented and experienced people in the mountains the last couple of years. It's really been heavy. And so I think, at least for me and Emily, what that has been doing is just reminding us to keep checking in on why this stuff is as important as it is, where the value is, why it's so valuable, why it's worth all the pain and heartache that it brings to so many people. The joys got to outweigh the heartache, and but it's an important thing to be checking in on, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, our thoughts and prayers are with those directly affected by the loss of life. Well, you're heading off to the Himalayas soon. I can tell you're busy, so we won't take up too much time. Your mannerisms just scream, I'm slammed right now. But the Himalaya, the season is beginning. What do you got from Himalayan news?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but someone on a Zoom yesterday was like, "You look tired." And I was like, "What?
I didn't say
Wait,
that.
I do? Fuck." I feel great. Well, Himalayan news, I mean, personal news is, like we are now hurtling through the final days of shipping thousands of pounds of food and essential equipment over kind of the last shipment that will go before we head out. All of our team has received their visas. We're kind of like locked in for headed to China soon. I'm sleeping at like 17,000 feet in my hypoxico tent right now, so that might have something
That's
to
why
do
you
with my
look tired.
tiredness. I'm just fucking worked every night. It's definitely not helping my rock climbing. I'm actually noticing my rock climbing ability, like pure power, is actually going down. And it's been more notable this year than ever before, but it might be because I've been in this focused rock climbing. I'm actually working on a project, a route I really want to send. And I was
getting
noticing
farther away.
Yeah, my performance was going up as I was learning the route, right? So combining all the trading with learning the route. And then in the past like 10 days, I've actually watched it like kind of peak and start petering up. So I'm blaming the 10. Who knows? Maybe it's just like my mental state. But I got 2 more days on the route. We'll see what happens. What's going on in the Himalaya, though, I think exciting side is that, everything looks as normal in China and, receiving the paperwork we'd expect to be receiving at these steps. So that's exciting. Loads of teams are already on their way in to base camp on the Nepali side because some people do still run traditional 75-day long trips. And that means they're on their way now, along with a lot of the high altitude workers, Sherpa, icefall doctors who put that side of the mountains route in. And news that's kind of trickling out, it's looking like it'll probably be another record-breaking season with numbers on the mountain on the Nepali side specifically. Nepal's announced they're dramatically raising the peak fees for next year. And they're going to start requiring that every climber must be with a high altitude worker with a Nepali Sherpa on the mountain. Those 2 changes, I think, are meaning a lot of people are trying to like race in and get this last cheap season in. That's not a great thing for the South side and potentially the experience there, but it is just the reality. And then the other thing we're watching, we've been hearing from our Sherpa friends who still live in the mountains in the winter that it was a really dry winter. And now we're getting sort of confirmation from that from climbers on Annapurna. So Annapurna is one of the 8,000 meter peaks, and it has traditionally an earlier weather window. Based on where it sits in the range, it can be climbed in April instead of in May. There's probably 100 climbers there, maybe 50. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's becoming very popular as people try to climb all 14 8,000 meter peaks. People are going for the summit push this weekend. But what we've heard is that the climbing is really challenging because it's all rock and ice instead of snow like it normally would be. And that the snow line, when you step off of rock and onto snow, is maybe up to 2,000 feet higher than it normally is. All that to say, dry conditions in the mountains, while you reduce avalanche hazard, you dramatically increase rockfall hazard, icefall hazard, serac falls. Like snow traditionally kind of holds the mountain together when it once it's stabilized. It falls, it stabilizes, and it's kind of the glue. Some of the glue might be missing this year, and it'll be interesting to see how that affects climbers on both sides of Mount Everest.
Absolutely. Well, it's an interesting season shaping up, but the reality with Everest is, you never know what the season's going to look like until you get there and people are on the mountain and you start, hearing what's going on, hands-on.
That's absolutely right. And just like ski season in Tahoe, one storm can dramatically change how the mountain feels. It can make it more dangerous with avalanche hazard. It can also make it much easier as things kind of stabilize and come together. If I was thinking about one thing, though, as climbers at home getting ready to go, I would be thinking about making sure my crampons are sharp. If you've never sharpened your crampons before, watch some YouTube videos. It's a good time to figure that out. And I would be thinking about, have I worn my crampons on rock before? Like, have I kind of done that uncomfortable, weird scrambliness? And if I hadn't, and if I was in somewhere like Colorado or Wyoming or Tahoe, I'd go throw some crampons on and go walk around on some rock.
It's very uncomfortable and not pleasant, but good skills to have, right?
Absolutely. And I guess, do we have time? How's our news segment? I got one more.
Let's do it. What do you got?
Well, so for the past couple of weeks, Matt Siegel has been staying here on our property, professional climber for the North Face, very well known for his rock climbing, crack climbing skills, alpine climbing. He's been on the team forever. He's kind of like one of the old souls now, along with Emily. I think they both joined when they were kids, you know. But Matt, along with his partners, Jesse and Quentin, just did a really interesting ascent on the Diamond of Long's Peak. And it was considered a winter free climb, super unusual, actually only been done once before. And they did it on quite a difficult route called D7, a famous rock climbing route in the summer. And this is where the fun controversy comes. These guys climbed in rock shoes, but used ice tools. And there was plenty of snow and ice on the face. Like, it is a 14,000 foot peak, Long's Peak, in the middle of winter in Colorado. This is a very alpine face, but it's also a famous rock climb. And I think the ascent was like fantastic because they tried for 7 years. They had a wild adventure. They suffered super hard and they sent it. At the same time, I think, like in our little fishbowl, it's raised this really interesting conversation of, can you use something like ice tools on a rock climb, and are you doing damage to that climb? Any thoughts?
It's an interesting question, right? And I think that if you know a rock climb has been climbed with ice tools, you might be able to find some scars, some marks. But I would also argue that if you went out there and went rock climbing this summer and you didn't know anything about the ice tools, you would never notice the scarring or any marks that may have been made from the ice tools. So I think when you know both sides of the equation, it's easy to figure out the flaw. But when you only know one side, or you're out there, and I just don't believe that you're really going to be seeing that scarring, or the rock climb is going to be changed in any way. So that's my 2 cents.
I like that. I am sure that's true. Of course, if you want to take it out to the, like, you know, illogical end, you could be like, well, what about if 5,000 people did it, you know, and then would it start to change the character? And you know,
if you can find 5,000 people to follow that climb,
they want to go alpine climbing on the Diamond in winter. Yeah. Exactly. My initial response was like, these conversations are actually really good to have, but let's do them respectfully, probably not through hot takes on X and Instagram, but through like long form conversations. Like, I got to sit with Matt next to his Traeger grill while some salmon cooked and have like an hour and a half conversation about the style and what it meant to him and things like this. And obviously not everyone maybe has that opportunity, but longer form conversations. Matt's going to be at loads of different festivals coming up the next few months, including like mountain film and outside festivals. Like, grab him, have a conversation, put him on a panel where people can actually talk about it. So that would be my first thought. Like, obviously these guys are not assholes. They didn't come out of nowhere. They didn't say just a big middle finger to the climbing community. So get their perspective and then have a conversation about it. And then kind of tied to that, I mean, I'll share my personal opinion. My personal opinion, for what it's worth, I'm not like a regular Diamond Long's Peak climber, but I've been up there a few times on some of the classic routes in summer. Also done a lot of alpine climbing, obviously, around the world. You know, my immediate thought was like, the face of the Diamond in the middle of winter, the face of the Long's Peak Diamond, like, it should be considered a badass alpine face. It's turned into an amazing rock climbing face, but when I look at that face, I think like famous north faces of the Alps. And like, these would certainly be appropriate tactics on rowdy north faces of the Alps, regardless of what rock climbing is happening on those faces in the summer. So this is not guys taking their tools to like red rocks and going and climbing classic lines, or even El Cap, or, you know, something like that. It's big mountain terrain in winter. I think the techniques are appropriate. I actually personally think even crampons would have been appropriate in that scenario. And would we have to accept some marking of the rock due to that? Yes. But I want more people to be alpine climbing, because alpine climbing is rowdy and it's like this dying little piece of our sport in some ways. It certainly feels less popular to me than it did 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So, like, I think what they did is a rowdy alpine face in fantastic style.
Well, I think we'll have to get Matt on in the future and chat with him about his climb and some of his other exploits in the mountain. He's certainly quite the character.
Absolutely. Would love that.
Awesome. Well, another guest coming up in the near future, Melissa Arnott, just came out with a book, Enough. So if you're eager to listen to that episode, you should download the book on your Kindle audiobook, buy the print version, and check that out before an episode with Melissa.
I was just going to say, I highly recommend. I have this policy that I will never read books about mountains while in the mountains. Luckily, right now I'm in the desert enjoying warm,
so you're ripping through the pre-release copy.
Exactly. So I ripped through a pre-release copy, and it is a read. So much to learn about Melissa and our industry and her story, and there's a lot to learn. So it's a good one.
Be a great conversation coming up. But first, on this episode, we have Garrett Madison. Garrett is the founder and operator of Madison Mountaineering. He's been guiding in the Himalaya for a long, long time. He's got tons of experience similar to yourself. He was the kind of, first to really lead guided climbs of K2, which I think is a notable one. And we didn't dive too deep into that, but lots of conversation around K2 and Everest and the Himalaya in general. So stay tuned for a great conversation with Garrett Madison.
Welcome back to the Duffel Shuffle. I can't even say the name correct, even though we've officially been doing this for a year, I think. Episode number 26, every 2 weeks. So we're a year in, and for our annual 1 year in episode, I'm so excited to have Garrett Madison of Madison Mountaineering. I'll give you a quick intro, Garrett, before you jump in. But Garrett and I have really been like friends and peers in the industry for so many years. Founder of Madison Mountaineering, a mountain hardware athlete. He's got over 200 summits of Mount Rainier, 14 summits of Everest, 4 of K2, and countless summits of the peaks that we know as the 7 summits. But really, when I think about Garrett, there's a couple of things that stand out. One is really being the pioneer of guiding on K2, what has really been thought of as the most dangerous of the 8,000 meter peaks, and one that wasn't really a commercial guiding objective. And yet today it absolutely is. And that's really been in large part due to Garrett's work. He's had a really interesting program for many years of doing first ascents in Nepal as Nepal opens up new peaks. So actually bringing clients to attempt first ascents, which is just a totally different style of guiding than the more like, okay, we're dialed, we know how to nail this, and we're just going to do it. And I feel like I've just been running into you around the world for years, from like eating a great meal in Hong Kong to running up the side of El Cap, supporting Emily's free attempt, to lots of time in Kathmandu before and after expeditions. But really, with all of that said, and Sam and I were talking about this before it came on, like what I really think of you is like the hardest working guide in the high altitude industry. Like you are just, from what I can tell, I don't even know where you live, and we've been friends for years because you're just always on a mountain guiding clients with huge smiles, being successful. So just so interested to dive into that, how you do it, why you do it. Garrett, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Adrian.
I think probably the easiest way to start, before we talk about how you still spend 8 months a year in a yellow tent today, which, or at least I think you do, where did all this start? When did you start climbing? Where did you grow up? How did you enter the guiding industry?
Well, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest on Bainbridge Island near Seattle. And luckily, my dad took me out hiking and backpacking in the summers. We'd go out for a week or so, usually trying to get up to a high mountain alpine lake in the backcountry. And I always enjoyed scrambling up to the ridge lines to get the airy feelings of exposure and the 360-degree views from these small peaks, and just loved it. And then when I was in high school, my dad asked if I wanted to try Mount Rainier. And we didn't have any skills or technical experience, so we signed up with Rainier Mountaineering, the guide service that had the monopoly at the time, got our training literature and all of our equipment together, and showed up, met our guides, and just had an amazing experience. And so that's how I got hooked.
Was that your first summit of Rainier on that trip?
Yeah, that was my first summit of Mount Rainier, my first glaciated peak, first technical mountain. I'd done some rock climbing indoors in the Vertical World climbing gym in Seattle, but that was my first big mountain experience. And I was just in awe of the exposure, the challenge, the difficulty, the seriousness of the climb with the exposure, the crevasses and cliffs, and also the guides. I was led by Phil Urschler, a longtime chief guide on Rainier, legendary American mountain guide who pioneered peaks all over the world. And he really made a big impression on me, as well as the other RMI guides. I thought, wow, these guys are all like supermen. They're out here in the summer climbing Mount Rainier with heavy packs all summer long and getting super strong, and then going off to climb other peaks all around the world the rest of the year. Wow, what an amazing lifestyle.
You saw that. Were you able to immediately sort of start down a path in that direction? Like drop out of high school, start guiding? Like what did it look like?
Well, where they were seemed impossible to get to at 17 years old, a high school student. So I went off to college, but my first summer job was working as an apprentice mountain guide on Mount Rainier. So I was able to apply, go to the guide tryouts, and they took a risk on me and hired me as a 20-year-old to start off as an apprentice guide from the bottom, learning how to do the basics on the mountain and assist the senior guides.
I imagine a large chunk of those 200 summits on Mount Rainier were in those initial years. Like, how does that progression work? I'm one of the few American guides that didn't go through like the Northwest education, right? I ended up on a really different path through Chris Warner and Earth Treks and things like that. But so, like, how long was it? How many summits of Rainier was it before they were like, oh, let's take this guy to some other mountain?
It was a lot, probably 40 or 50 at least. And, you know, I was happy being an apprentice guide and assisting these legends like Phil Urschler, George Dunn, Craig Van Hoy, Brent Okita, all of these guides who had been guiding for 20 plus years and had so much knowledge, experience. I was happy to be their assistant and learn from them. So I got this incredible education, learning, working with senior guides all over the mountain, doing different routes, different programs. And eventually the company said, okay, Garrett, it's time for you to take the test to become an associate guide, the next level up.
That's the next level.
I remember scheduling that test with the supervisor staff and having to perform some technical performances, whatnot. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then eventually senior guide status.
At what level do you actually get paid? If I know anything about the guiding industry, it took a while.
Yeah, well, I started off at $65 a day, which doesn't sound like much now, but you know, I just loved being up there, loved the work, loved the people, and would have done it for free, would have paid to do it. So yeah, I was really lucky to find something to call my career that I love so much.
And you mentioned RMI. Was that the company you basically built your career with? Or did you eventually switch to Alpine Ascents? Was that in the mix? Or?
So I started off at RMI, and that was the place to work as a guide with wanting big mountain glacier experience. And then in 2007, the Rainier concession was broken up by the national park, and two other companies were let in on guiding Mount Rainier, International Mountain Guides and Alpine Ascents International. And I went to work for Alpine Ascents International as their Rainier program manager, guide manager, and then also as an expedition leader later on, leading trips to Aconcagua, Vincent, Everest, and other peaks.
Awesome. So you've really seen, it's interesting, you've seen the Northwest kind of progression over all that time, and also kind of those like permit kind of challenges and systems that have changed some, but they're still really challenging. Kind of, you know, jumping all the way forward to today, does Madison Mountaineering run trips in the United States? And have you acquired your own permits in the Northwest? Is that even possible?
We do trips domestically in the U.S. Probably less than 5% of our business is domestic. And part of that is just because the permits are so difficult to get in the United States. We have permits. We have a half dozen or so permits in the Northwest, and we're able to operate one climb on Mount Rainier every year. There's 15 single-use permits, I believe, given out to small companies. And so we get to do that. We can go Mount Baker. We can go to Mount Olympus, North Cascades, Mount Shuksan, et cetera. But there's so many companies offering these trips, and they're a lot of work to operate. So I like to focus on the big peaks.
Yeah, absolutely. With that kind of Northwest education that you have, do you think that still Is that still the standard, would you say, for an American mountain guide? Like, is that just a great way if we're talking to, I know we have a lot of listeners, people who are aspiring to get into this business and to do these dream jobs, which I agree with you, like what you spoke, like as I was getting into this sport, just looking at these guides, right, doing these amazing things. And now that I'm one of those guides, I'm like, oh, it's different than a little bit different than what I looked up to or imagined when I was like a 16-year-old. But when you think of pathways into this industry, is that still a great way to get started?
I think so. Yeah. Obviously, there's many different routes into the industry and to become a mountain guide. But I think cutting your teeth in the Pacific Northwest, specifically on Mount Rainier as a younger guide, is an incredible place to learn and gain experience. There's just so much to do up there. And there's big storms that roll off the Pacific that we have to deal with. There's complicated route finding on glaciers. There's the altitude at 14,000 feet. Expedition style guiding, great prep for Denali or other big peaks. So I think it's a great place to learn how to become a guide before going off to bigger and harder objectives.
Garrett, obviously a lot of your education was just through doing the thing, guiding on Mount Rainier, and you never pursued IFMGA certification to my knowledge. Do you have any thoughts on that? And kind of looking back, would you do it any differently? Or do you feel like your kind of exposure on Mount Rainier and to those legendary guides on Mount Rainier gave you, the education that you needed to take it internationally?
That's a great question. I certainly recall when I was starting off as an apprentice guide 26 years ago on Mount Rainier, learning about the IFMGA and the AMGA. But in my workplace, it didn't seem very relevant, very significant. And I had heard guides talking about it, but no one seemed to be actively pursuing it. A few of the older guides had been grandfathered in with, I think, Alpine guide status. But then later on, it did become something that guides would pursue so that they could go work in Europe or Canada or New Zealand or other places where the IFMGA certification is required to be working as a mountain guide. And I certainly saw the value of the training. And for me on Mount Rainier and the mountains I was going to, there was no IFMGA or AMGA requirement. So financially, it didn't really make sense to go to the courses, take the exams to obtain those certifications. I think all of the training is incredible and great, and we should always be continuing our training and education. But I also believe there's no substitute for really good experience. So I guess it's a balance. On the one hand, there's good training. On the other hand, there's good experience. Like, how do you get enough of both to be really proficient and capable and serve the customer well out there in the mountains?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's interesting in that, when you're talking about your experience at RMI, it sounds like there was a very formal process to be, an assistant and then maybe a trip leader on an easier route, and then moving through and actually being examined to move into kind of more of a lead guide status and take it internationally as well. And so it seems like, in the era that you got into guiding and who you got into guiding with in RMI, you went through that very, regimented training program similar to what now the AMGA provides to American mountain guides and the IFMGA has internationally.
Exactly. There was a lot of structure at Rainier Mountaineering in terms of becoming a guide, advancing your qualifications and capabilities to lead rope teams. And same with Alpine Ascents, an incredible amount of structure, in-house guide training, which the national park also looks for in terms of issuing these permits, these concessions. They want to know that their local partners, the guide companies operating, are conducting a minimum standard of in-house training with their staff, which is specific to that mountain and the route that they're guiding on, which I think makes a lot of sense. Like, if you're primarily guiding the Disappointment Cleaver or Emmons route on Rainier, you can teach and train to those specific routes. If you're guiding the West Buttress on Denali, you can teach and train your guides to effectively guide that route, which is very different than going to the Alps and guiding multi-pitch rock or alpine routes. So it's one way to operate a guide service, a business in a national park where we're really focused on specific routes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at a certain point, I'm sure you were like sick of walking up and down Rainier and you had to take it beyond that. Rainier is a fantastic mountain. I agree. I think it's a phenomenal training ground, both for clients and guides. But man, does it suck to go up and down that thing constantly. And so at what point did you decide, you wanted to take your skills internationally or to other peaks around the world? And was that something that you really pursued, or was that something that the operations you were working for kind of pushed you into those opportunities?
I was very interested and curious to pursue the international opportunities. So a little bit of both, I think. My first trip was to Mexico volcanoes, then Aconcagua. And I just love the combination of international travel, visiting these new places, these new cultures, and also getting to take on a bigger peak, a harder objective. So it became very exciting, exhilarating, and I just wanted more. I wanted to travel more and climb more all over the world.
Oh, it's awesome. And so, you started with Mexico volcanoes, then on to Aconcagua. Is that a progression that you push clients towards nowadays? Like, that's a very typical progression as far as I'm aware. Is that something that you've built into your business model with Madison Mountaineering?
Yeah, especially for clients that are looking to take on bigger and harder peaks. Mexico volcanoes, Ecuador volcanoes is probably one of my favorite venues. I'm sure you all probably agree. It's just got so much to offer, such a wonderful place to visit. And from there to Aconcagua, maybe a Vincent trip or Elbrus when it's reopened, and then Himalayas to dabble in some 6,000 meter peaks.
Elbrus is open. We had a client a few weeks ago be like, I went last summer as an American. It was awesome. I'm like, what are you talking about? And who took you? It's amazing what's possible out there.
Right. Yeah, it's another risk we have to take into account with our expeditions, right?
It's absolutely true. It's just the geopolitical side. It's like I try to do so much reading and think so much about it, and I still find myself constantly being surprised. And I guess the key is just having a little bit of diversity of our programming, right? Because we know we don't control these things. And so being over, situated in one company, I think back to when I was working with Himalayan Experience or Russell Bryce, and he only worked in China. He only guided Choyu and the north side of Everest. And that was a really difficult position to be in once that relationship became more strained. So how many countries are you operating in today with Madison Mountaineering?
I don't know off the top of my head, but last year in 2024, I know we tallied up that we organized and led successful expeditions on all of the 7 summits. I have to caveat Denali. Obviously, that was through Alpine Ascents, one of the national park concession holders. We organized the trip and kind of got it ready to go, but it's not our trip. But yeah, all the other 7 summits, 3 successful expeditions on Vincent last year, half dozen or so on Aconcagua. Of course, Everest was successful, Kilimanjaro, Karstens, got to last October, snuck in there. Elbrus, actually, we did have one client go to Elbrus.
Wow.
Yeah, we worked with our Russian partner on that. I didn't go myself.
All right. Yeah, just showing it is possible. Well, we'll get to more of Madison Mountaineering shortly, but I want to kind of close the link. So you were guiding with Alpine Ascent, starting to do many more of these international trips, as well as I'm sure still being on Rainier and Denali, I would guess. When was your first invitation to go to Everest, or what was your first experience there?
Oh, so my first experience was actually in 2006. I was invited to go with a company called Mountain Link. And
all right.
It was an expedition. There was one client who wanted 6 guides to go with him rather than have other teammates.
Wow, see, you were ahead of the curve. That's today, 2024 guiding right there.
Right. So I had never been to Everest. I'd been to Choyu before. I'd been on Amida Blam. But I was so excited to have the opportunity to go to Everest and to be compensated, to be paid something for my work there as the communications manager. I'd figured out how to plug in the Palm Pilot to a satellite phone and send some small videos and photos. And it was just a magical, wonderful experience, and had a great summit. The client didn't make it. He actually got a bad cough at Camp 3 and decided to go down. But he had told us, hey, if I have to turn around, I want you guys to go to the summit because I know how much that means for you to climb the peak. So we got to go to the summit, had a wonderful expedition. And then I thought, gosh, I'd love to come back and do that again. So much fun. So when I started with Alpine Ascents the next year in 2007, after the Rainier program got up and running well, then Todd Burleson, the owner, asked me if I wanted to go to Everest starting in 2009. And so I went from 2009 every year with Alpine Ascents. And in addition to working as a mountain guide, I also was helping organize some logistics and work with a local partner outfitter there, which was really meaningful and interesting to me. So I've been going to Everest every year, just like you, except for the COVID year, and hope to go back at least a few more times.
Excellent. I mean, it's funny. I think there are some, just from age probably, but also other reasons. We have some parallels of like 2009 was actually my first time on the South side after the failed expedition in 2008 on the North side. So kind of like cutting our teeth there in some similar ways, and both working for kind of like legendary figures in the sport and industry, right? We refer often on this podcast to the Everest Inc. book by Will Cockerell in the episode we did with Will, but it's a great way to kind of learn about those early years and legends on the mountain. But obviously, eventually you left and formed your own company, similar to myself. Can you speak a little bit about why you decided to ultimately form Madison Mountaineering? Was there a problem you were trying to solve or something you wanted to do differently? How did it all come about?
Yeah, so I started my company 11 years ago, and the impetus was I wanted to do some new programs, new projects, K2, unclimbed peaks, and I was ready to move on and be in full control of my destiny, the expeditions, and that part of my life. So I had a very graceful departure from Alpine Ascents and started my own company exactly 11 years ago with an Everest expedition that was going to have a big wingsuit stunt on Everest, live on
right?
the channel. And unfortunately, as you know, the icefall tragedy occurred, and we lost some of our Sherpa team in that. And it was a tragic ending to the season for all the teams on the mountain. So that was a tough way to start a business. And then, of course, the next year, we were back and very excited to be attempting Everest, and found a new route up through the icefall. It seemed much safer. And then on April 25th, the Nepal earthquake happened, which killed 9,000 people in Nepal and over 20 at Everest Base Camp. And again, another very tragic ending to that season for everybody. So a tough couple of years starting off in the guiding business.
What a brutal way to start. I didn't actually remember that timing. But obviously you had something, right? There was something that you believed in that kept you going through those years and continuing to build the foundation and ultimately the success of mountaineering. Were there times in those initial years where you were like, fuck this, I'm going to be an accountant? Or were you always sure?
Those were a tough couple of years to start off on my own, and a lot of doubt, especially with those two Everest expeditions imploding so tragically for my team, myself, and for many others on the mountain. But I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to retire on such a negative note to me personally. I'd had 6 great expeditions before those 2 years with good summits, good safety, very positive overall outcomes. And I thought I have to at least have one good experience on Everest before I walk away, because I can't walk away from Everest now with all this negativity and heartache.
Yeah.
Well, and at the same time, you in 2014 kind of pioneered guiding on K2. And so, with such struggle on Everest, you also had, total success, and, you kind of really opened the door for something that hadn't been done before, just months after, Everest challenges and tragedy.
Right. Actually, coming off the 2014 Everest tragedy, I came back to Mount Rainier and was filling in for Alpine Ascents on the guide roster, because I obviously had a lot of friends there and connections, even though I'd left to start my own company. And at the end of May, I think it was, one of the teams got avalanched off the Liberty Ridge side of the mountain, both guides and clients, probably at night when they were camping. And so another tragedy right after the Everest one. And then I'm in Pakistan with clients, and people are saying, God, are you crazy? Like, you just had this horrible situation on Everest, Mount Rainier. Now you're going to Pakistan, which K2 is supposed to be even more dangerous than these other peaks. But we went and we had a wonderful expedition, great weather, great conditions, friendly people, and got super lucky, had a successful outcome. So that was a good rebound for me personally and professionally.
How was kind of pioneering guiding on K2? Obviously, as you mentioned, it has the reputation of the most dangerous peak, arguably, in the world, certainly of the 8,000ers. And how was it received starting expeditions there? How was the process of telling people you're, planning logistics for a guided group? Did you have struggles there? What did that all look like?
Yeah, it was an interesting time. I recall some folks were very intrigued, and others said this is irresponsible. Guides should never take people to K2. But there were already companies going to K2 offering logistics services. So building on top of that, and bringing the Western guided structure to the program I thought it's not all that much different from what we do on Mount Everest or other 8,000 meter peaks, incorporating the Nepali Sherpa, the oxygen systems, the weather forecasting, Western guide, supervision, leadership, risk management, decision making, and tying that all together didn't seem that far out. So we were lucky and pulled it off on K2.
And you've since pursued, I think you said 7 expeditions to K2 since 2014.
8 times.
Is that something? 8 times.
Yeah.
Is that something you're going to continue pursuing? How, what's your relationship with K2 now?
Oh my gosh. Each time I finish the expedition on K2, I've been 9 times now. I say to myself, that was it. I'm not coming back. And then a few months go by and, people start asking about it. And somehow I talk myself into going back. So this will be number 10 this summer to Pakistan and K2. But I'm thinking about retiring after that.
10's a nice clean number.
That is an amazing number. I mean, just because records are fun, like, do you have the most expeditions or most ascents of, I don't know, anyone, an American? Where do you fit in the pantheon?
Yeah,
so many expeditions.
I think there's a couple Sherpa who have a summit or 2 more than that, but 4 summits of K2 is the most for any non-Sherpa, I believe. There's a couple non-Sherpa climbers, European or actually South American, now with 2 summits, but I don't think anyone else has 3 or 4.
Wild. And so your retirement is such an interesting thing to discuss, but is it because the risk feels so different, or is it the place and the logistics and the challenge of it? Like, what makes you feel differently about K2 or your K2 program than, let's say, Everest, which you said a few minutes ago you hope to do quite a few more still?
Well, I've always had great experiences on K2. Pakistan has treated me very well, especially the people. And we've been very lucky with the weather and route conditions. But overall, I think it's much more challenging and much more difficult and more dangerous than guiding on Mount Everest. And as you know, everything from the trek in to base camp, and then you get to the mountain, it's so steep, so unforgiving if you make a mistake. And there's so much objective hazard, specifically rockfall, avalanche hazard, icefall hazard higher up. And there's no good way to rescue off of K2 on the Nepal side of Everest. Helicopters are able to fly up to Camp 3 and long line climbers off, and they fly regularly to Camp 2 to pick people up. On K2, maybe you can get a helicopter into base camp, but the weather's not that good, so it's very intermittent. So if somebody gets hurt up there, it's a very tough rescue evacuation.
Yep, that makes a load of sense. And do you find is your feelings around risk changing as you go further and further into your career and kind of timeline in the mountains?
He's saying as you get older, but he's older than you, so we're good there.
Like, do you feel your risk assessment changing, or is it just like at a certain point it's just enough?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I feel like I've been gradually accepting higher levels of risk as I've aged throughout my career. And perhaps that has to do with more experience, more understanding of how to operate in some of these zones, like on K2 or unclimbed peaks in Nepal, Pakistan. But I think ultimately we have to decide what we're willing to take on. And the reality is, if we're out there at high altitude long enough, there will be fatalities, because human beings, our bodies are not designed to exist at 8,000 meters. People will die from medical health reasons. So I guess kind of weighing that in with our job, like, there's so much we can do to mitigate risk in terms of technical climbing, avoiding objective hazard the best we can. But ultimately, if we're out there long enough, there are going to be fatalities, and that's something we just have to come to terms with.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've now been in this industry for over 2 decades. There's obviously been a massive amount of change in the high altitude world, especially on the tallest peaks of the world. You and I have been a part of bringing in some of those changes, and yet there's also a lot of changes happening around us. How do you feel about the health of the industry, the health of Everest? Are you enjoying it still? Tell us a little bit about what you see.
Definitely still enjoying it personally. Have felt like there's been a lot of change in the last 20 years since I've been going to Nepal and the Everest region. And, some of that's good. I think some is bad. Unfortunately, the environmental impact has been exacerbated. It's increased with the number of climbers. And so now hopefully we can find ways to mitigate that. and to spearhead some efforts to remove waste from the mountain, but also increase education. Hopefully we can incorporate some leave no trace training with local operators, and maybe that becomes a standard so that everybody's on the same page in terms of minimizing their environmental impact on the mountain.
What do you see out of the Nepalese government on that front? I know, in the last few years, they come out with a bunch of regulations, but there's not always follow through in terms of enforcing those regulations, particularly around cleanup. Do you think that the effort is there and good, or do you think that more can be done from the governmental side of it?
I think there's good intentions, but it's tough to enforce that, especially up higher on the mountain. There's nobody keeping watch. So there needs to be more enforcement, stricter regulations, and hopefully some awareness and education with the local community where the ethic changes. And it's not acceptable to leave behind any trash on the mountain. Hopefully it's a pack it in, pack it out ethos that permeates all of the climbers on the mountain.
And in the meantime, of course, that has to be the goal, right? That ethos kind of spreads throughout the entire industry and everyone working, playing, and living in and amongst the mountains, especially as the mountains get busier. As I understand it, though, you've also started a foundation. And is the primary focus of that foundation, is it on sort of cleanup and kind of looking at some of those issues in the Himalaya?
Exactly. We had the opportunity the last couple of years to work with a climber and a sponsor that wanted to do some waste cleanup and removal effort. So through that, we were able to lay the groundwork and identify locations that had accumulated waste from climbers and target those areas, hire local staff to collect the waste, sort it, transport it down, turn it over to the local entities for recycling, repurposing, or disposal, and then obtain a certificate of kilograms collected. So it was a good way to do something. And hopefully we can also incorporate some education. So this fall, we're planning to do our first foundation project, which will be in the Khumbu Valley, working with the SPCC and Sagarmatha Next and collecting some garbage from a couple of the base camps on 6,000 meter peaks, and then turning that over to the local entities.
It's great. I think you described the two pieces really well, right? Like it seems like you want to create a baseline, which would be a clean mountain or a clean camp, which takes a lot of work to remove kind of years of potential buildup. And you kind of need that baseline, and at the same time, education and regulations and hopefully enforcement of those regulations. So once you get to that baseline, it actually can stay there, or at least closer to there than it was before. Those two pieces all need to kind of like mesh together.
Exactly.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Alpenglow Expeditions, a Tahoe-based guide company with an international reputation. In its 20th year of operations, Alpenglow leads the highest quality expeditions in some of the world's greatest mountain ranges, from California's High Sierra to the rugged Himalaya. Alpenglow runs more than 40 international expeditions per year, as well as offering a full menu of guided ski and climbing courses throughout California. Join us and experience the Alpenglow difference.
I think that's really cool that your whole initiative of that, obviously, keeping the mountain clean and leave no trace principles are important to you. And I'm sure they have been ingrained in you since you were a young guide for working for RMI, but really cool that foundation and the efforts were kind of spearheaded by one of your clients. And I was going to ask, having guided, 14 expeditions on Mount Everest, what have you seen as far as a client goes, and how have you seen the client profile change over the past 14, 15 years? Do you think that there's a change in the client profile, or is the media around what a client looks like kind of just creating this persona that is more media centric than anything?
I think the demographic has definitely opened up more. 20 years ago, I think the client profile was probably a little bit more similar, but now all types of individuals are going to Everest. And that's through increased access, right? With better access and awareness, people are able to visit the mountain. And Everest is such an iconic and magical place. I think everyone would probably want to visit Mount Everest if they could. That's a lot of human beings. And with technological innovations, helicopters, with more operators, outfitters on the mountain, making it more accessible, easier, perhaps, nicer accommodations, higher flow oxygen, better food, nicer tents, stronger local guides. It makes it more accessible or more doable for non-climbers, for more everyday folks. So I think that's what we're seeing, just increased access for everyone on Everest, which used to be a place for only those that had spent decades in the mountains, working their way up from small mountains to hard technical peaks to other high altitude peaks. And we're finally ready to take on this massive undertaking. Now folks can be a non-climber and within a few months gain the technical skill and a little bit of experience to go with a guided group to Everest. So it's been a big change in the last 20 years.
And personally, what's your take on it? Obviously, as a business owner, there's lots of value to having more people interested and able to climb a peak like that. But at the same time, you must have a perspective, having seen it change over the last almost 2 decades. Where do you kind of draw the line in terms of how much accessibility you want to help enable, and what's your, personal perspective on it?
Great question. Obviously, we can't control what other operators are doing, but for our company, our team, we require prospective Everest clients to have done a number of smaller glaciated peaks, such as the Ecuador volcanoes or Aconcagua, Mount Vinson, perhaps 6,000 or even an 8,000 meter peak in the Himalayas like Choyu or Manaslu, and with solid performance, meaning that they summited those mountains and could have done more, could have climbed higher and didn't need to be rescued or dragged down by Sherpas or something like that. So with solid performance on 6,000 meter glaciated peaks, then we're ready to take someone onto our team. We want everyone to be an asset, not a liability. And that's part of our job, is to evaluate clients on a day-by-day basis on the expedition, in addition to the risk mitigation. So we want everyone to make it, but obviously we have to be healthy, we have to perform well, and we have to get lucky with the mountains, weather, and route conditions.
And then how about on the client experience side on the mountain? Do you feel like you're constantly trying to meet the quality of other expedition operators in terms of what they're providing? Or,
how's your espresso machine?
Yeah, exactly. Adrian only cares about how nice your espresso machine is.
I bet it's nice.
Are you matching the base camp luxuries of other operators, or do you feel like you're like, this is what we're providing, this is where we're going to draw the line? And I know that there's lots of base camp luxuries out there, but I've just heard, it's almost getting out of hand on Everest in terms of what, you can do anything if you just put more and more money towards it.
I would say we are very climb focused, and my goal is to provide the best experience for the climbers going to the summit and coming back. And we have a very nice base camp, but I'm not in a race to provide the fanciest base camp. I feel like there are some over the top examples out there, and that's great if that's what folks want to focus on. But we're focused on the climb, doing it safely, successfully, and enjoying the experience. So we'll leave it at that, I guess, and not get into these fancy base camp resorts that are popping up, because then it changes the focus away from the climb towards other things, and we have to choose what we want to do best.
I like that. I think you put it well. It's a climb focused trip, and there are base camp luxuries because you're going for 40 something days. But that being said, it's still about the climb.
And in the mainstream media, this is one of the things I often get asked, and I'm interested in your perspective. People will say, like, we should give the mountain a year off, or it needs a reset. We need to really figure out regulations and all these different environmental concerns and things like this before we continue to grow, which is industry almost inevitably does. Because like you said, if someone had the opportunity to go to Everest, why wouldn't they want to go check it out? How do you feel about that? Or how do you think about that? Like on the south side, how is the mountain doing? How is the capacity going? Does it need a break?
Well, I guess that's up to the Nepal government, because they own the south side of Everest. But I think the mountain will decide and let us know. I think there was some discontent on Everest through the 2013 season. And some superstitious individuals thought the tragedies from 2014 and 2015 was a result of the mountain expressing the discontent from the 2013 season. And so a lot fewer climbers went in 2016. And then, of course, COVID resulted in the closure of the mountain for spring 2020. So I wouldn't want to stop going so that we could all discuss and opinionate because I know where that's going to go. But I think by working together and being proactive and following through on what's important to us, like hopefully we can remove more trash from the mountain this year and inspire others to do the same. At least pick up after themselves and perhaps pick up other trash that's not theirs, and then maybe integrate some educational programs so that everyone gets on board with that. I think that could be a good thing. I think Everest is a microcosm for humans on planet Earth. It's like we're the canaries in the coal mine. And these issues we see on Everest, like trash or human waste or other issues, are happening all over the world in major cities on a much grander scale. But we see it and we talk about it on Everest because it's such an interesting venue.
I 100% agree with that. I feel like we're just like a little human laboratory on Everest, like, because everything is just like more intense in some ways, right? Like the challenges, like you said, are no different than life in a city, life in a community, different people, different goals, conflicts of personal goals versus group goals, all these different things, success and failure, how we deem those. But everything is just like, okay, now we're going to do it all within 5 or 6 weeks. And it's going to be in the most extreme environment on the planet. And most of you have never met before and you got to figure it out. It's like the ultimate like challenge course for like some corporate development program, but we're doing it, on Mount Everest. It's one of the things I love about it is that I feel like I've said this a couple of times during the podcast, I'm still like surprised. I think we are real professionals. We've thought about this so much, like how to run our perfect trips and what's important to us. And we go there and we do a damn good job. And still every year I get surprised.
Totally.
And overall, I love that as long as we can get everyone down and off the mountain through my surprise.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. We have this very well laid out plan for the expedition, and guaranteed every year some curveball is going to come, something will go sideways, and we'll have to change all of our plans. There's no contingency we had written into the book for this one, and we'll just have to adapt to move forward, or we'll have to head home.
Well, I think we'd be remiss having you on the podcast and how much we talk about Everest to not talk a little bit about South Side and North Side. So, I was interested, Garrett, and I think a lot of our listeners have asked, like, we obviously talk a lot about the North Side and my feelings about it and things like that, but our listeners regularly answer, well, like, what's the other side of the story? So, I'd love to hear a little bit, like, have you ever considered the other side? I'm not sure historically if you've been to the other side and why you prefer the South Side for your operation.
Well, I've only climbed Everest on the South Side. This will be my 18th Everest expedition coming up next month. And
wow.
I've been to the North Side for Cho Oyu in Tibet. I was there recently last September, October, had a great trip. And I would like to spend more time on the North Side. I'd love to check out Everest North Side and climb that someday or lead an expedition there. But I guess I've fallen in love with the South Side of Everest and Nepal. I love trekking in through the Khumbu Valley up to Everest Base Camp. And I feel good about it. That said, I would love to explore the North Side. So I know there's some big differences on both sides. What I like about the South Side is obviously the familiarity. I like that the high camp, Camp 4, is about 1,000 meters from the summit, not as high as high camp on the North Side, correct? So it's an easy up and down and then kind of out of that super high altitude zone and then quickly down the Lhotse face. One nice thing about the South Side is the helicopter access, although that might be changing. We never know. But historically, the last decade and a half, helicopters have been able to get into the Khumbu Valley to rescue climbers in distress from Camp 2 and as high as Camp 3. So that's nice. I know on the North Side that hasn't happened yet, maybe this season or soon in the future, but that ease of rescue and evacuation has been nice on the South Side.
Yeah, I certainly think it's a real thing. And also, I can certainly tell you from our marketing perspective, I don't know if that's the right word, but the single biggest concern we hear from potential clients is the lack of helicopter access on the North Side rescue. And it's true, just hands down, right? If I could have helis on the North Side for rescue specifically, and if we could somehow actually manage and keep it to that, I would do it in a second. Like it just, I guide quite a bit in the Alps as well as here in California, and the difference of heli rescue ability and speed, even though we do have more and more access here in California than we used to when I started, but it changes outcomes. It just does. You dangled there might be changes going on in Nepal around the heli system. What's the news?
Well, actually, it's not in regards to rescues. There is a push by the local municipality in the Khumbu to limit the use of helicopters for tourism, recreation, scenic flights, cargo flights as well, and just to allow them for medical evacuation flights. But I doubt that restriction will be put in place because there's just so much dependence now on the helicopters for all of these other activities. So I suspect it'll stay in place. Another benefit of the South Side, I think, is the stability of being open. I know there's been some difficulties on the North Side with the mountain not being open all the time. I remember Russell Bryce back in 2008, I think it was, getting delayed and saying, okay, I'm done operating on the North Side. I'm moving my whole operation to the South Side instead of Choyu, Manaslu, and now going Everest South Side. And that was a big deal. It really opened up Manaslu from there on forward. So yeah, I like that Nepal seems to be more stable, business-wise, business-friendly. And I guess I've just fallen in love with the Buddhist culture and trekking into the Khumbu Valley.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the first trips I took with my kid Arrow after he was born, I think he was not even a year old yet. And, we took him trekking in the Khumbu Valley to the village Lhotse, where a lot of my Sherpa friends that I've worked with for decades are from. And it was just like one of the most powerful experiences I could, he won't remember it, but it was powerful for me and Emily. We just thought it was the raddest way to share something with him and to see it through slightly different eyes and kind of see how our Sherpa friends raise children and treat children and things like that. And yeah, I think that valley is so magical. You could probably hear, even though I strongly am very happy running mountain expeditions from the North Side, and I think there is a lot of culture and incredible people to connect with there. There's something about trekking in the Khumbu Valley is just one of the wildest, raddest experiences on the planet. So I feel my heart is close there as well.
I want to talk more about South Side versus North Side, but I don't know where to take it.
Sam's like, let's stir that pot some more.
No, I mean, it's interesting to hear you guys talk because there's pros and cons to both sides, and there's no clear, definitive, as someone that's never been to either side, there's no clear definitive decision in my head. And I think Adrian, you and I at one point had talked about what if you could trek through the Khumbu and then take a helicopter from the South Side base camp to the North Side base camp and then climb the north side of the mountain. Obviously it'd be ridiculous from an, environmental standpoint and an economical standpoint and everything. But that would kind of give you the pros of the North Side with some of the major pros of the South Side. And obviously the access isn't a constant unknown, but it's right. An interesting one.
Right. And ultimately, I mean, I think, and I'm guessing Garrett would agree, it's a great thing there's multiple sides to the mountain and multiple normal routes, and that different people will choose to prioritize different things. So some clients might choose to prioritize the fantastic trek or the cultural piece of Nepal or the helicopter rescue or the lower high camp. And some people might choose to prioritize the climbing more on ridges or the easier access to base camp or the fewer teams and fewer people. It's great that there are different options. It's no different from, I'm going to go to the Alps on a ski trip and I'm going to go to the Italian side of Mont Blanc because the pizza and espresso is better. I'm going to go to the, French side because the lifts run on time and they actually, are open more than they're closed and things like that. So I think we're lucky there are two normal routes.
Garrett, speaking about Everest, you're off, I'm sure, in a matter of weeks. What does your team look like this season? And, tell us a little bit about the Everest season for you.
Yeah, so we're heading over in early April to start our expedition. We've got about 10 clients going in with myself and 2 other American guides. I say American guides, one's Argentinian, but that's Western Hemisphere Americas. This will be his 4th trip with me to Everest. And then we have a Makalu team. We've got Teray, another Tahoe local, heading off to Makalu with 3 clients. So we're all going to trek up the Khumbu Valley together and spend the night at Everest Base Camp together. And the Makalu team will drop down after doing Lhotse East to Dingboche and then fly over to Makalu Base Camp. So a nicer way to acclimatize in the Khumbu and the comfort of the lodges there before going to Makalu. And then myself and the Everest team, along with the two other Western guides, will start our rotations. We do Lhotse Peak first as a warm-up and a bit of acclimatization. And then we'll do one rotation through the Khumbu up to Camp 1, 2, try to touch Camp 3, back down to base camp, rest, probably fly to Namche for a good night's sleep, 4 or 5 days. And then when the fixed ropes are in and the weather's looking good, we'll go for our summit push. I like to target the later second weather window on Everest, somewhere around May 20th to 24th. Seems like a lot of the climbers who are very impatient like to go in early to mid-May, and it kind of clears out some of the traffic. And we've been so lucky the last 3 seasons. We've had the summit nearly all to ourselves for up to an hour. So by waiting a little bit, going later, and being more strategic about planning our summit attempt, it's worked out well for us. Fingers crossed it happens again.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned one team, with the exception of the Makalu team, going with Touré. Do you tend to sell, you've got super rapid expeditions, you got people with Western guides, people with not Western guides. Do you have lots of different packages, or do you have kind of like, this is the Madison way of climbing the mountain?
Yeah, it's pretty much just one team. We don't have all the a la carte options. We have some small options, but not much in comparison to other companies. And we do have the Everest Express option, which you sell as rapid ascent, I believe. So we have a couple guys doing that. They're pre-acclimatizing in their hypoxico tents at home. They'll fly in and meet us after our Lhotse Peak climb and join for the second rotation and then for summit rotation. So really they integrate with our main team, and we're all together most of the time. And I do like to climb together with everyone. I feel like we're so much more successful, stronger, and safer if we climb together as a team, supporting each other. Because when we encounter problems up there, issues like a broken crampon or malfunctioning oxygen system or tough route conditions, we're much more successful problem solving together as a team, as opposed to individuals out there on the mountain trying to figure it out by themselves and alone. So I'm a big proponent of a team that supports everybody in terms of the collective success. So generally we always start off together, but spread out during the day with a guide at the front, the back, a guide floating, some Sherpas floating, checking in on everyone, regroup at the breaks, regroup in camp. But that way everyone can walk their own pace. Nobody feels like they're being forced to march at a pace they're not comfortable with, whether it's too fast or too slow. Everyone can kind of walk their own pace as long as it's reasonable. And then hopefully we all summit together.
That's awesome. And you still climb with the team each year. Do you ever think about running the team from base camp, or are you still wanting to go up high every season?
Oh, I love being at the top of Mount Everest. There's nothing like it. The energy up there is, it's a magical, special place. There's only one summit of Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world. And I love being up there. I would stay for longer if I could. I think close to 2 hours was the longest I ever hung out on top. It's just a happy place. And more than anything, I love feeling like I genuinely help and contribute to our clients having a successful experience and achieving their dreams, their goals, their bucket list. And when I see them summit the mountain and the joy on their face, and I feel like I can participate in that a little bit, it makes me really happy.
It's such a good description. I think we often talk about climbers and guiding and how maybe the joy or what you take out of climbing for yourself versus guiding, they can be really different things, but they're both super powerful. And what you described is exactly why I started in this industry and still do it today. And obviously it's something that really drives you. We kind of started this podcast with, I don't even know where you live, because you seem to be on big mountains so much of the year. How many months a year do you average on expeditions with clients? How many do you have planned this year yourself, not the company, but yourself in 2025?
Oh gosh, it's probably 8 to 10 months a year on expedition. And it's been a lot of fun. I'm not married.
How's your dating life?
Well, I'm married to the mountain, so mountain comes first. Not a very good dating life. But I really enjoy it. I feel very lucky and privileged to be able to pursue my dreams and my career of organizing and leading expeditions all over the world to some incredible places, as you know very well. And I've got a great team that supports me on the back end and lots of good partners all over the world who provide logistics and infrastructure. So it's been a lot of fun and just trying to squeeze as much out of it while I can. We're not getting any younger, so maybe a few more years and then start slowing down a little.
As you do start to slow down, do you think that Everest will, your passion for Everest is, I can feel it through the computer. Do you think that Everest is one that you will try and continue like until the bitter end? Or do you think that the bigger, longer, more intense expeditions will be the ones that you'll kind of slow down on first? Or have you not even gotten that far because you're just expedition after expedition?
Well, if we can figure out how to live forever in our peak, then maybe. But no, I'll have to slow down on the big peaks first. Everest, other 8,000 meter peaks. Probably transition into a role in base camp, coaching from base camp, and then maybe eventually have somebody take over that as well. I can coach virtually from somewhere else in the world. But no, I really enjoy being up there. The whole process of climbing Everest, the good, the bad, the suffering. So hopefully I can be up there a few more times.
You could just finish your career, doing laps on Mount Rainier, maybe get to 500.
I don't think that's in the car.
That's like, we have some Ecuadorian guys like Jaime Avila, I think stopped counting on Cotopaxi at 19,000 for a peak. I think he stopped counting at like 450. And I'm like, what? That's kind of a random number to stop counting at. He's like, I know I have at least 450. It's unreal.
Wow. You must really love it.
Yeah, it's possible. Garrett, asking for a friend, you're guiding that much. Is there anything you've changed or learned in terms of your, body, whether it's nutrition or coaching or training or stretching, yoga? Like, what do you do to stay healthy over 8 to 10 months a year on big mountains?
Well, obviously there's a lot of information out there, but for me, just listening to my body, I think is the most important, and rest is incredibly important for us. Good nutrition, time to decompress and be out of that stressful environment from managing an 8,000 meter peak expedition. So a little bit of rest, recovery time. They say protein is good for us. So different forms of protein, whether it's beef or fish or protein powder. Yeah, just good rest between expeditions.
And so you're in Mexico right now, right? Is this an official rest period? You're not climbing Orizaba and Ixta right now, right?
Right. I'm working remotely here near the beach in Mexico and getting in some paddleboarding, some surfing, some swimming. So staying active and eating a lot of tacos, a lot of fresh fish tacos, but definitely not putting on a heavy pack and climbing any hills right now.
That's amazing.
You've got that soon enough.
Exactly. I wonder how common that is. Like, I'm actually leaving tomorrow from Tahoe, like just to get out of the snow for a bit. Now I'm only going to Vegas and, my wife is still going to make me rock climb, but at least I'm in the desert and it's in the 70s and the food in the city is incredible. Like, I do think for me, like, I never want to go straight from winter and a winter season guiding in Tahoe straight into Everest. Like, just a little bit of a reset and rest. It makes a huge difference for me, even if it's only an excitement to be cold and suffer through storms again.
Totally. And one thing I hear a lot of people say who are older and still have a lot of ability is not to slow down too much. And whether that means getting hurt and having an injury and then having to recover for 6 months or a year, or just pushing ourselves too hard to the point where we have to take time off, or just taking a break because we want to sit on the couch for a long period of time. Just continuing to move, to stay active, keep our bodies healthy, listening to our bodies. That sounds like the best advice that I've heard.
Yeah, it's great advice. I like it. I don't think either of us are in danger of sitting on the couch for 6 months.
Hopefully not.
No, I think it's interesting. There's a big difference between rest and like being a couch potato, right? Rest is changing, not doing the activity that you're used to doing so much, but you're still staying active. You're out every day, I'm sure, in the ocean. That's a much different rest than just sitting on the couch and not doing anything, which I think is, when you can get yourself in trouble.
Totally.
Well, Garrett, we always like to wrap up with 2 questions that we ask everyone. Maybe you're prepped, maybe you're not. The first one, I'm sure you just have so many choices of what story to tell, but we love to hear from our guests kind of your best Duffel Shuffle story. So think nightmare expedition scenario.
Oh my gosh.
With lots of bags, lost or otherwise.
Well, I've been pretty lucky, but one time, actually my first Everest expedition, we were taking about 50 duffel bags with us to Nepal, and we were flying out of Bend, Oregon to LAX and then to Asia. And the airline out of Bend said, we can't take it. You're going to have to drive it to LAX and check it in there. So we rented a U-Haul, loaded up 50 duffel bags in the U-Haul, drove to LAX, myself and a colleague. And we literally drove straight to LAX, parked right in front of Tom Bradley International on the curb in this big U-Haul. And I jumped out to go inside to talk to the Thai Airways representative about how do we get all these duffels in? And of course, security was all over the U-Haul, right? Pulling up to the curb. Guy jumps out and runs inside. And they came up and they're like, sir, you need to open the U-Haul and we need to check what's inside and you need to get it out of here. But it all worked out very well. So learn not to pull up a big U-Haul right to the curb.
That is so
surprising.
Epic. Yeah, that is not what anyone wants to see. Huge U-Haul screeching into the curb.
Oh, man. And Garrett, our other question that we want to ask is, what is the number one item, let's say, that you're packing for Everest? Maybe it's a product you've been working on with Mountain Hardwear, or just something that goes with you everywhere you go, that kind of comforty item.
Oh gosh, I'd have to say for Everest and other 8,000 meter peaks, it's my down suit. It's the Mountain Hardwear Absolute Zero 8,000 meter peak suit that I was able to work with the design team on, and I feel really good about where it's at right now. Love to be in it up there at high altitude. So excited to climb back into it soon. I got to wear it 3 times last year for Everest season, K2 season, then Shoyu season. So we'll see how many times I get to live in it this spring coming up. But also, in addition to that, the Starlink. I'll be packing a Starlink with me. That's definitely changing how we're operating expeditions these days.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you were there in the early 2000s when like just getting a couple of megabytes out, whether it was a photo or something from the Palm Pilot, it was so epic and painful and also exciting. And now today, imagining, Starlink, Alpenglow been bringing Starlink on like Amada Blams and other Nepal expeditions and all over the world. It really has transformed things. You obviously mentioned it as an essential thing to bring. That connectivity has been more a positive than a negative for you and your teams.
Yeah, definitely. Like we were just in Antarctica and had Starlink at Vincent Base Camp for the first time throughout the season.
Amazing.
And it was really nice to have that connectivity to keep in touch with family, friends, and keep up with the emails and the business stuff for everyone. But at the same time, it does change the expedition. And I am nostalgic for the old days when we went off on expeditions and we had no way of communicating. It was just all being totally in the present. So I do miss that a little bit. And there are times above base camp where we don't have Starlink. We've got the Garmin InReach, of course, but it is nice to get up and get away and remember what it's like to not have that instant communication.
Absolutely. It takes just more of like a conscious effort now, right? Like we used to just have these huge blocks of our lives where we were just without connection, not reading the news, not, constantly being distracted and being just with the people. Those things are still possible today. They just take a lot more effort and planning.
Totally.
Well, Garrett, thank you so much for taking the time. We want to make sure you get the last bit of sun rays there in Mexico before you're off to Everest. So we won't take any more time, but really appreciate it. And we wish you all the best on your upcoming Everest expedition and beyond.
Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you, Adrian. Hope to see you on the summit of Everest for a high five in late May.
Oh, how rad would that be? I like late May as well. So I'll be looking for you. Thanks, Garrett. It's been great to chat.
Right on. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Duffel Shuffle Podcast. You can follow along on Instagram, where we post our favorite clips from each episode, as well as more about the world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Catch you next time, and until then, we hope you enjoy some time outside.